Okay, well, I'll share my screen here, maybe. Oh, let me start the show here from the beginning. Okay. So Jake gave you the introduction. I've been a member of the Union of Concerned Scientists for about 5 years. Um, I'm a scientist and I'm concerned, so I said these must be my people. And I've been really pleased with the focus that they have on um, gathering scientific information perspective to apply to problems in the world. It originally started actually with a focus on nuclear energy, if you can imagine, and but climate change is a big one. So without further ado, I will get started here. Going here. Okay, so here's our brief agenda here. I'll do a couple of minutes on the climate science, although my expectation is that by now most people know quite a lot about this and I don't need to go into any depth. A little bit on the climate impacts in Maine, of which there are a lot. A discussion about the Maine Climate Council, which has been in progress now for a couple of years and has done actually really amazing work. And then lastly, the implementation part of this, because it's now 2021 and the Climate Council has made their report, and now this is supposed to be the implementation year. So this is when the rubber meets the road and we actually start doing things that can address the problem. So my view on these presentations is you tell people what you're going to tell them, and then you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them. So if you can stand the redundancy, these are the messages from me. The first is that the basic challenge is we have to get greenhouse gases to zero as fast as we can. We're already experiencing damage. It's not going to go down, and we need to really put a big effort on this. The second part, which is to me is very hopeful to me, is the drivers to make this happen. There has to be government action. There has to be technology from the industrial sector and the public. All have to be in alignment to say this is something we want to do, because all those parts are essential. And third point is, I'll go into a little bit of the Maine Climate Council work, but they have done a really thorough job. And I think the state of Maine should be really proud of the caliber of people they're able to put together and the focus that they gave to this to really cover it from stem to stern, all the facets of this, and put together a plan that can work. And last thing is implementation, which is partly the same as point two. Everybody has a role in this, and you should be thinking, or everyone should be thinking how they can play a part. So this is the basic, global warming 101 slide, which I assume most people understand, that energy from the sun passes through the atmosphere, which has a certain amount of greenhouse gases in it, hits the earth, warms up the earth. A lot of it is radiated back into space, but some of it is not. It stays in the atmosphere and it accumulates. Just for a point of reference, this is really a diagrammatic picture. The thickness of the Earth's atmosphere is only 60 miles, which means on this globe you wouldn't even be able to see it. It's amazing what a thin film of air we have over us and the effect that it's having on us. So this being the case, I'll jump to this slide. This is, many of you may have seen this. This is, I'm not going to show a bunch of graphs, but this one is gotten to be famous. It's called the Keeling curve. And this was an annual measure of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere starting in 1958 through the present. This chart's a little out of date. This only goes to 2017, but I've put in the numbers for last year and this year. So this number continues to rise. The amount of CO2 in the air continues to go up. It has a seasonal rhythm to it that you can see in the sawtooth, because Mauna Loa is in the northern hemisphere, which is where most of the landmass of the earth is. That's where most plants are. And what you're seeing is the difference between winter and summer. In the summer, plants are actively sequestering carbon dioxide, and in the winter they're not. So it goes down and it goes up sequentially. The other interesting thing to me, because I like scientific trivia, this began in 1958. And the reason it did was, some of you may remember, that was the International Geophysical Year. That was the year that 65 countries and their scientists said, we need to study all the facets of the Earth and space and everything else. That in late 57 is when Sputnik launched. In 1958, the US launched its first satellite, Vanguard 1. And the opportunity seemed right to actually start gathering scientific information. And that's, as a result, we have a chart like this. That's a continuous record from 1958 till now, and it's still underway. So needless to say, global warming makes it hotter. We have a record now going back to the 1800s, really, of what is happening to the temperature. It is going up. I think there have been a number of studies on this. It's at this point, I don't think there's a lot of contention about it, but just to make the point, here is data that says it's going up. This has real effects. Here's a little tool that we have on the UCS website, where you can go to your county and see, if you look at the trends that we have here, there's a historical trend, a mid-century trend, and a late-century trend. This tells you how many days you'll have above 90 degrees. And currently in Hancock County, you get perhaps 2 a year. But as you look, if we don't do something, by the end of the century, you're at 41 days per year that are over 90 degrees. And that's not something we're used to in Maine for sure, and not something you want to have to put up with. So if you go to this site, by the way, you can find this information for any county that you're interested in. I know not all of you are in Hancock County, or perhaps all of you aren't, but you can find your own information if you like. It definitely affects us here and now. This is just a whole potpourri of all the climate disasters that we've been going through. Last year was horrible. When you think, this is actually, today is the anniversary of the COVID actually being declared a pandemic. Tomorrow will actually be the 1-year anniversary of the first Maine infection. But going back today, this also turns out to be the anniversary of the 1918 flu, 103 years ago. So history repeats, or as Mark Twain says, it doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. You see it all over again. So of this chart, last year was incredible. We had Atlantic hurricanes are getting more and more common. We ran out of names for them last year. We had to go into Greek letters by the end of the year. Hurricane Laura hit Louisiana, which was actually a bigger storm than Katrina. It didn't cause as much damage because they were better prepared for it, but massive storms. A Category 5 went through Central America in November, following another hurricane in the same month. In 2 months, they were putting up with this. So that's happened, the extreme flooding. You also have the opposite. You have little or no rain. We had we got close to a drought in Maine last year, which doesn't happen very often. And the one that fascinated me, I never really heard of up here, is a derecho. At the same time that Louisiana was getting whacked with this hurricane that had winds between, constant winds between 70 miles an hour and 140 miles an hour, the Midwest, in the middle of the country, was getting hit with a derecho. Derecho comes from a Spanish word for straight, because these are straight line winds. It's just having a wind blowing straight through, and its magnitude was the same as that hurricane, 70 miles an hour continuous and 140 peak. It caused $11 billion in damage to crops and property, and a few deaths, actually. I've never heard of that, and now here's the extremes in the weather are getting crazy. I don't have to tell you about the western wildfires. California and the Pacific coast had an enormous amount of wildfires, and so did Australia. Then early this year, the opposite happened up here, where Texas and a band down through the Midwest got hit with a huge cold front that came through. That doesn't happen a lot. I went to school in Austin. It never snowed in Austin. They had 6 inches of snow. The electrical system failed. Pipes were freezing. It was just an unbelievably large disaster. So someone said, only half jokingly, it says, when you look at the wildfires in 2020, that was the year from hell, and 2021 with the freezing was the year hell froze over, and I can sort of understand that. So let me jump now to the Climate Council. This was announced a couple of years ago. A 39-member council with 6 working groups, and considering the scope of the situation, this was intended to cover every aspect you could think of climate change and what you could do about it. How do you mitigate it? Where can you actually make progress and reduce it? It was extremely inclusive, which I think is important. If you look across public polls of the country and of Maine, Maine in general is the same as the country, and maybe a couple of points higher, in that about 72% of the population not only believes that climate change is real, but that we need to do something about it, that government needs to do things, that we need to invest in renewable energy, a lot of the topics that you'll hear about on this. But if you look at the list here, all of these commercial areas, hospitals, housing authority, Maine Forest Products Council, everyone had input into this. And I sat through a few of the meetings of the subcommittees. These were extensive. Fortunately, being Zoom, everyone could take part. It was open to everyone. You could ask questions, and they generally wrapped it all up very well. So it's fortunately also, I think we're fortunate in Maine, it's bipartisan. Renewable energy standards, solar options, funding for electric vehicles, energy efficient heat pumps and insulation. All of these things are on the table as real and viable approaches to take to this problem. So the goals of the Climate Council at the highest level are jobs, a level playing field for all people in the state so that no one is disadvantaged by what we're doing. Resilience. We have not seen the weather problems the rest of the country has. Fortunately, Maine is very fortunate where it sits, but we do have a really long coastline, and changes to sea level and other changes to the ocean will definitely affect us, and we need to figure out what we're going to do about that. And the big one, which is reducing carbon pollution. That's the ultimate goal of all of these. So one of the subcommittees of the Climate Council was the Scientific and Assessment Subcommittee. Scientific and Technical Subcommittee was its actual name, which put together this document, Scientific Assessment of Climate Change's Effects in Maine, which is available online on the state site. It's an excellent document. It has all those graphs and data that you're looking for in a scientific presentation to define the situation. And you'll find information on the extreme heat days, like I already showed you a little bit. The increase in sea level rise, sea level temperature, and acidity. One of the side effects for Maine of the increasing temperature is the melting ice in Greenland and Antarctica that you read about. Greenland is melting very rapidly. It's dumping a very large amount of fresh water into the northern Atlantic, and it's actually made a big bubble of fresh water that's north of Maine in the Gulf. And it does two things. It is blocking the normal Labrador current from coming down, which is cold water, and it's stalling the Gulf Stream, which is coming north with warm water. Normally the Gulf Stream comes up near us and then it heads east towards Europe. But between those two currents, that's what kind of keeps the Gulf of Maine stable. That's now unstable. And that big bubble of air is also disrupting air currents, which also help move water. So what we're seeing is sea level rise just by all the water from melting ice. You're seeing a higher temperature. It's the Gulf of Maine is one of the fastest growing, fastest rising temperature bodies of water in the world. And you're also seeing acidity. The more CO2 there is in the air, the more it's absorbed into the water, and you get carbonic acid, and your pH goes down. That has a detrimental effect on lots of fish and seafood that we're interested in. Lobsters don't like it. They're the centroid, I think, of the lobster industry has moved out of southern New England, so Massachusetts pretty much doesn't get anything. We're still pretty much okay, but it's going to continue to move north towards Nova Scotia as all these things happen, the temperature and the acidity change. Coastal flooding is already happening, not as severely in some places. When you go to Miami, they now get daytime flooding where tides cause the streets to flood. But I live in Falmouth, just north of Portland, and on a high tide day in Portland, depending on what the wind is doing, you can have flooding in the Back Bay area. The parking lot for the Whole Foods will have 6 inches of water in it, and this is only going to get worse. And lastly, you've seen these effects of rainfall and snowfall. It can be up or down depending on where you are. It's just become very variable as the climate has changed. The normally dependable air currents that keep the cool areas cool and the warm areas warm are taking off in different directions. You end up with derechos happening in the middle of the country. You end up with areas with no rainfall or too much rainfall. And in Maine, as it warms up, we will end up with more rainfall and less snowfall, which can be good or bad depending on how you look at it, but it is a reality. That's what will happen. So the slide didn't really work out, did it? I have cut off half of this group here, it looks like, but I wanted to give recognition again to the Scientific and Technical Subcommittee. Being a scientist myself, I appreciate this. There were a number of people with a lot of experience in this area who are willing to lend their time to do this, and they work collaboratively. This is only half of the list. Somehow the other half has fallen off the slide. But it comes from a lot of different areas in the state, a lot of different disciplines. And when you read the report that they gave you, you really get the sense of how much they put into it. Oh wait, here's the rest of it. That's odd. Hello, that's more like it. There's everybody else. So Ivan Fernandez and Robert Marlini were the co-chairs, and the rest of us were the members here. So anyway, it's a very impressive group. I think Maine is very lucky to have this caliber of people available to work on something like this. I'm not aware of any other state that has done anything as comprehensive as this, so we should be proud. Here's the organization of the Climate Council. You can see the Science and Technical Subcommittee is one committee along with an equity committee that they decided they really needed to have to make sure that we were looking at this from the perspective of all the citizens of Maine and taking all that into account. Below, they broke this up, this big, huge, massive question, and they broke it up into different areas: the building and infrastructure, coastal and marine, community resilience and public health, energy, transportation, and natural resources. And each of those committees had other people on it, who had expertise in that area, and they put together sub-reports. So the action strategies as they came out of all of these meetings are as follows. I mean, I'll let you read them. Embrace the future of transportation in Maine. You can see actually the first A, B, and C are the main ones relating to reducing carbon. However, the other ones are important too in terms of making it clear what will happen. D, if we focus on those things, it will have an effect on Maine's economy, both in the efficiency of it and is it creating jobs for people. E is important because we in Maine are very proud of our environment and protecting the environment and the working lands and waters. And carbon sequestration will come up later in the talk here, which is, I hadn't expected that to, but it did. And the last one, as I said, you have to build healthy and resilient communities to be able to withstand. There's no doubt we will have impacts from this. It's a question of how fast can we move to mitigate them so it's not catastrophic. So these are the two documents that came out of all this: the Scientific Assessment of Climate Change we've talked about on the left, the Comprehensive Action Plan, which was appropriately titled Maine Won't Wait, is the summation of all those different areas that we talked about on the previous slide. And again, both of these are on the website, the state website, and I recommend that you at least look at them. The Comprehensive Action Plan really is comprehensive. It's like 175 pages. So, don't expect to read it, over breakfast, but if you, it's very well explained and documented. So I recommend that. So the statutory requirement that came out of this was to get an 80% reduction in carbon dioxide by 2050. Here we are in 2010, which is actually 10% below 1990, then 2030, 45%, and then 2050, 80% below the 1990 levels. Now, those are the ones that came out of the report. Since then, the governor issued an executive order for this other requirement at the bottom, by 2045 to be carbon neutral. And that's 5 years before you're at 80%. So you have to ask yourself, how do you do that? You're still emitting more than 20% of the carbon you do now. And the answer is that goes back to carbon sequestration. Maine is in an unusual situation that it's a state that is 70% forested. And if we manage those forests, which is part of the plan properly, you're actually taking a large amount of carbon out of the air. And if they do it the way they would like to, by 2045, you could be taking out as much carbon from the air as we are putting into it from all of our other activities. So that's no other state in the country is attempting to do that that I know of. And like I say, we are fortunate that we have the ability to do that just because we have a large amount of forest. So let me get rid of that. Let's see. So what's interesting, a side story on that is being carbon neutral would be bragging rights for the state as far as I'm concerned. There is actually one country in the world that is already carbon negative. They take more carbon out of the air than they put in. So here's your pop geography quiz for the evening. Does anybody know what country that is? And I'm going to say no, because I sure didn't before I looked into it. The Kingdom of Bhutan. This is Bhutan shares exactly those traits that we're talking about for Maine. It's heavily forested. There's not a lot of heavy industry, and a lot of it depends on tourism. So a lot of their income comes from outside. So our goal is, and Bhutan is like 30% negative. So they take a lot of carbon out of the air for their size. So that's the gauntlet that I would toss for Maine. Okay, we can be carbon neutral. Can we actually match Bhutan? So here's our timeline. As I said, we started in 2019, and when it was first started with LD 1679, there were up through the end of last year was putting this plan together. So that time period encompasses the time that all of this information was pulled together from all these different areas and all these working groups. And then that was delivered December of last year. And so now we're in 2021. This is the actual implementation phase. Now it's time to take all that information that we gathered and actually start applying it. In 2024, there'll be the next Climate Action Plan summary delivered to the legislature. So there will be quarterly meetings. So there will be good tracking during this time period to say, how are we doing? What are we actually implementing, and how much progress are we making? So in implementation, my philosophy is everything is impossible until it suddenly becomes inevitable. And in looking through what's going on in the world, it struck me that this is almost a historic opportunity in terms of alignment. You now have government focus on this as a major problem, not just for the country, but the world. At the international, federal, and state level, we've rejoined the Paris Climate Accords. There are other countries in the world that are making very strong efforts in this regard. At the state level, we now have this plan that we're putting in place, which is very comprehensive and should get us where we're going. And the second player in this is industry. As you'll see, if industry can't provide some of our solutions, then no matter what we talk about, it's not going to happen. We need the government to focus on regulatory matters and perhaps funding for some things, but we need industry to provide us with products that are solutions for this. And lastly is public awareness and personal action. Maine is roughly at the national average for, I would call public awareness, about maybe a couple of percentages higher, at 72 or 74% of the population of Maine across the state says, yep, global warming is a problem. We need to do something about it. We need to invest in renewable resources. So there's a whole list of questions like that, that at least implies to me that the public is ready to hear what it is we need to do to make this happen. So I think that's remarkable. And there are opportunities, obviously, for personal action for people to make a difference for themselves. So I'm not going to go through all those 8 areas because a couple of them particularly interested me. Transportation and electricity production. Transportation is 54% of the carbon output of Maine. That's a reflection of what I said before, where we don't have a lot of heavy polluting industries. We don't make steel or concrete. We don't have fossil fuel industries. So when you look at what we emit, a lot of it just comes from cars and trucks. And when I looked at that last year and said 54% of it is cars and trucks, how fast can you even change something like that in an entire state? So this was a slide I did last year. Here's our 52% greenhouse gases. The third point is, if you're looking at EVs, they're still relatively in early development then in a general sense. They're expensive. You don't replace cars, every year, so your chances of turning over the population of cars is limited. And the impression I had from years earlier was people still thought they're range limited, they're too expensive. Where am I going to get it charged up? Am I going to have to wait someplace for 4 hours to get it recharged? There seem to be a lot of disadvantages to it. What's remarkable is Uh, 2 years ago, the previous administration was actually suing California over their right to have their own corporate fuel economy averages. You may remember that. California wanted to be stricter than the rest of the country, and the administration was trying to say they shouldn't be able to do that. And companies were joining the suit on the side of the government. General Motors, in particular, was also suing California over the vehicle average. 1 year later, which is last November, General Motors withdrew from the suit and made the announcement that they're going all electric. I was like stunned. Here's what's happened in the automobile industry. Every car maker now sees electric vehicles as the future of the industry. General Motors wants to have everybody, all their cars, EVs by 2035. Ford wants all of Europe by 2030, Jaguar, Volvo, BMW, Volkswagen. And when you look at these numbers, it's astonishing. They're now taking the position that this is the future of transportation. And that means they're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. They're in business to make a profit and stay in business. That means two things from my perspective, being a product development guy. One, you get economies of scale when everybody's doing this stuff that you don't have when it's, the current situation. Currently, 3% of cars in the United States are electric, that's all. So when you compare that with the economy of scale for gasoline powered vehicles, it's not even close. The other thing is, as soon as you put your focus on this, a lot of research and development is going to go into improving what you have. I mean, internal combustion engines have had several hundred years to get better, and you're going to see the same thing happen to electric vehicles. One of the concerns, which shows on here, GM and Ford plan to introduce electric pickup trucks this year. One of the complaints I used to hear was, well, yeah, I can get some little roller skate car, but I have work to do and I need a bigger vehicle. Well, not only are we supposed to have electric pickup trucks, but Volvo and Tesla have prototype tractor trailers now. So you're now looking at the possibility of a full range of solutions for transportation, which I think is remarkable. The last point is what our goals are. The goal is to have 41,000 electric vehicles in Maine by 2025 and 219,000 by 2030. For comparison, I don't know what exists for this year, but Maine's current vehicle population is on the order of 400,000. So you're talking about nearly half of the vehicles by 2030 being electric. So this will be interesting to watch, but I'm a lot more hopeful about it this year than I was last year. The other thing to a bit of trivia for you. In the United States, what they call vehicle miles traveled, VMTs, which counts for all the cars and trucks, annually is 5 trillion miles. Now that's a number when you start getting over billions, sort of mind-boggling. Can't really figure what that means. 5 trillion miles is 500 round trips to Pluto. That's how much this country travels. So if you have a good solution for getting the carbon out by going electric, that has a huge impact. With cars, it's all about the batteries. In 1895, they had electric cars. They just invented the lead acid battery a few decades before. But 100 years later, when General Motors put their toe in the water, there were still lead acid batteries. They hadn't really made much of an improvement. By 2010, Tesla is now using lithium-ion batteries. Now it starts to become like a reasonable solution to people's transportation problems. But the other recent revelation is this. The current battery technology, there is a startup named QuantumScape. This is a startup backed by Bill Gates and Volkswagen, one of the richest individuals in the world and the largest automaker in the world. So this is not 3 guys in a garage. They're going to make this go. They have developed a solid state battery technology which improves in every way that I can see on current battery technology. It's higher energy density, lower weight. This has a 15-minute fast charge, which has always been the bugaboo for lithium-ion batteries. You can get to 80% capacity, which is pretty much full capacity for a battery. It can take a bigger temperature range, simpler to manufacture, and it's safer to operate. So when they're working in the next several years to have this all commercialized, when this goes to commercialization, if it can meet all of these claims, every single automaker that's making electric vehicles is going to want these batteries. So we've been waiting a long time for some kind of improvement in batteries, and this may very well be it. In terms of renewable energy development, there's been a lot happening there too on the solar front. I mean, Maine has actually led in solar for a long time, at least for the Northeast. But the second point, people didn't seem to be aware of this, but the technology of solar energy, it converts the energy from the sun into electricity, but it's the visible light that is converted. It's not UV. And so what's interesting is you have more potential to generate energy in Maine than you do in Houston, Texas, and about the same as Miami, because that extra heat down south doesn't do them any good. Your energy output is just the same. We actually have a greater capacity than Germany. And Germany is currently producing so much electrical power that they're dumping it into Poland because they don't know what to do with it. The efficiency of panels in terms of cost per kilowatt is just plummeting. I mean, they always said it would happen, and it's coming true. And you can see that now because the last line in there, within Maine, private companies have submitted over 600 plans to build solar grids of different sizes, some of them for towns. They want to build a large one to produce all the electricity for the Bath Iron Works. And so once again, I look at this from a private company side and say, they're not doing this to be charitable or because they'd like to pull, carbon out of the air. They're doing this because it's a financially viable business. They're going to make a profit doing this. So that will drive a lot of this activity. Wind production is the same. It's 14% of the state use, and it's more than all the other 5 New England states combined. Maine is situated with very good winds for electrical production. Besides what we have on land, Governor Mills had announced plans. We'll finally get our first offshore wind facility. It's a research facility. It's full scale, but it's only 1 turbine. But the construction will begin next year, and that'll be online in 2023. There was recently an article in the paper that said the ship is actually mapping out where the cable is going to go that will transfer the electricity to shore. So for looking at what's really, really clean energy, we're working, I see good prospects for that happening too. So the problem you have with solar and wind is they're intermittent. So what do you do about that? The Maine legislature is doing a bill to get 100 megawatts of storage batteries in the state by 2025. That's not anywhere near what you need, but it's a start. And again, private enterprises looking at this. This is a picture of a 5 megawatt project in Madison, Maine. And from the electrical grid perspective, this is considered to be a power plant. They will take energy in and store it and then bring it out when they need it. It's kind of like a backup plant would be today. And as I talked about, if those improvements in battery technology are true, you will see a tremendous increase in the possibilities of doing this, including even at an individual level. You can do it today expensively, but you may actually have a battery at your home someday, which is a backup for when you lose power or which you use to charge up your electric car. For home heating, the drive is for heat pumps. Heat pump technology has been around for a very long time. I've had it at my house for, I forget how long. It's 2 or 3 times more efficient than oil is. And if you look at the top, currently 2/3 of Maine homes are heated by oil. That number has actually dropped a little bit, but the drop was replaced by gas, natural gas. So the pollution effect is basically the same. The state has recognized this would be a great contributor to reducing carbon. And if you look at the bottom, they have a goal to install 100,000 residential heat pumps as part of this project. I'm sure part of that will be as a financial incentive. We have, you may be aware of this organization, Efficiency Maine. This is a great outfit in the state. They are basically consultants on energy use. They'll talk to you about how you can insulate your home. They'll talk to you about heat pumps versus other technology. They even have a list of electric cars that are available and what the pluses and minuses are. So they don't sell anything. They're just simply there as an information resource, and they're very knowledgeable. So if you had questions, they have a website too, Efficiency Maine. You can use that as a resource for decisions that you make as an individual going forward. So we talked about the government here, and legislation will be required to make this work. And so in the room we have Jake Roche, who is our current expert on this. So I will turn the talk over to him to let him walk through these proposals here. You're on, Jake.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bob. That was great. Definitely appreciate it, and I like the side roads you go down.
I'm easily distracted.
Oh well, I think it makes for a more intriguing presentation, and much appreciated. I'm gonna quickly go over this just because I want to leave time for Q&A. We did get a question or two in the chat, and I'll just throw this out there now. If anybody has a question for Dr. Dodge, throw it in the chat. And Emily Chang with Union of Concerned Scientists is going to facilitate the Q&A. So I'm just going to go over real quick. Union of Concerned Scientists is a member of the Environmental Priorities Coalition. And basically, we've identified priority legislation that can put Maine's climate plan to work. So there's several priorities, and I'm just going to touch on a couple. Number one on the list is fund energy efficiency and weatherization projects. Dr. Dodge just talked a little bit about energy or efficiency and weatherization. So heating, cooling, and lighting Maine buildings responsible for 1/3 of our carbon pollution and a significant financial burden on seniors, low-income residents, schools, and towns. So investing in energy efficiency and weatherization will reduce energy costs, support green jobs, and protect our climate. And also number 3 on this list, establishing a green bank to finance climate solutions. So financing is essential to rapid, equitable deployment of climate solutions. Green banks make it easier to finance clean energy, energy efficiency, and climate resilience by standardizing the process, reducing risks for local lenders, lowering interest rates, and leveraging public and private investment. So establishing a clean energy accelerator will prepare Maine to maximize federal funding without committing state dollars. So basically, during the legislative session, there will be many opportunities to share your opinion, and we can help you make a difference at a moment's notice on issues related to the support of the Maine Climate Plan. So if you're interested in helping out with the implementation of the climate plan, put an asterisk in the chat or get in touch with either Bob or myself or Emily sometime after. And for now, it looks like there's a couple more questions coming in. So I'm going to turn it over to Emily Chang. And Bob, if you'd want to stop presenting, we can all be in the same room. Cool.
We are.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Bob, and I'll turn it over to Emily for Q&A.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Awesome. Unfortunately, I'm not able to turn on my video, but I can go ahead and read out this first question from Barbara Bramble. What has been the central driver of the emissions reduction since 2005 in Maine? And I think Barbara mentioned the statutory requirement slide earlier.
Yes. I wondered about that myself, and the only thing that I can tell you for sure, because I can't find something quantitative on it, is Maine is unusual in that a large amount of its current energy production, in addition to what I talked about that's coming from wind and solar, is hydroelectric. So as you move off of other forms of electrical generation, that happens to be one that's not renewable in the sense of most of it comes from outside of the state, but it doesn't contribute to our carbon. So we're in a pretty good position.
Interesting.
Thanks. From here, we have another question from Virginia Liberator. Sorry if I got that wrong. This seems to be, I'm not quite sure if this is our expertise, but I'll ask it anyway. So Virginia's just got a roof estimate, an estimate for solar panels on her roof, and the contractor says that there's a federal tax credit of 26%. I think she's looking to see if that's true and if there's any other incentive available from the state of Maine.
Well, that falls right into Efficiency Maine. Those are the people that know all about this stuff, and they know what's real and what isn't. So I would really recommend getting in touch with them, because they'll tell you what you can do and what you can't.
And I can say from Union of Concerned Scientists standpoint, when there's bills in Congress, right now I'm wearing my state legislative hat, but I also work on federal legislation. So when federal issues around solar comes up, we've met with people in the solar industry and had meetings with Senators Collins and King about various credits and trying to extend tax credits for clean energy. So if that's something you're interested in getting more involved with, lobbying federal legislation, I'd love to be in touch.
Thank you, Bob and Jake, for those great answers. Our second to last question, it looks like, is from Steve Benson, and this is a great question. Will the environmental costs within the production of batteries be getting smaller and smaller?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the new batteries, they're safer, but they just frankly use less material. And so that all by itself is going to reduce their environmental impact. Also, I would say, from my own experience, my wife bought a Prius, 2006. And at the time it's, oh my God, these batteries are going to die after 5 years and you have to replace all of them. And she's still using them. Yeah. There's actually a cottage industry in taking old car lithium ion batteries and stacking them up and using them for energy storage. So I'd actually like to see somebody go back and recalculate based on a reasonable lifespan exactly what the environmental impact is of batteries even today.
For sure. Great. And I think our last question here is trying to understand more of geothermal energy. Heather Richard is asking, where are we at with the ground source heat pumps that use geothermal energy so that the issue with 25-degree or colder weather and heat pumps can be eliminated?
I don't think that actually got attention from the Maine Climate Council, unless you know differently, Jake, because it's very special. I mean, there are buildings I know in Portland that do use heat pumps, geothermal heat pumps, but it's more taking advantage of the difference in the ground temperature. Iceland is almost entirely geothermal because it really is geothermal. They actually have hot water and things underground that they use. It's a fair question. I suspect that the cost and the expertise involved in that makes it not a major player at the moment. And I'm not even sure who you would talk to in Maine about finding out more about it. I'll look into that though. That's a good question.
Thank you. So we've got about 2 minutes left and I'm trying to get through these last two questions before I'll hand it over to Hannah for the closing. Our question from George is, in the town of Blue Hill, there are several very important public facilities at the town's harbor, the Public Safety HQ and the Blue Hill Hospital. What are we to do, I guess, in terms of maybe sourcing the energy for those two buildings?
Maybe sea level rise as well. Is that, George, you can clarify if you want to unmute yourself too. Or give me a thumbs up if it's sea level rise.
Or who were you talking to, George?
Yeah, George typed that in.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, he makes a good point in the comment about the heat pumps. 25 degrees is where they start to lose efficiency, and that's kind of what people think of as a cutoff. It gets more expensive to run them as it gets colder, but they do work down colder. You just you lose the cost benefit.
Yeah, I think George's question was the one about the facilities that are near the harbor in town, and you've got yourself unmuted now, George. Do you want to clarify?
Yeah. Yes, in terms of town of Blue Hill, we have some very important town facilities, the fire and public, basically this public safety HQ, which is right at the town harbor dock. And then slightly up from that is the town hospital that started back in the 1920s with all the summer people. And then a big, brand new or newer wing, and then a medical facility. And I don't know what their total elevation above sea level, it's maybe about 10, 20 feet at most for the hospital. The fire department, public safety is maybe, 10. So there are some issues there. So what's the long-term planning then that the town should plan on, and the hospital, which is a separate entity?
Well, if you go to the Science and Technology Committee report, they have a sort of a low, medium, and high estimate of what kind of sea level rise you would have. For Maine, you would also have to factor in what happens. Are king tides different? I mean, the sea level is actually higher in Maine on the east coast of the United States than it is in Europe, because when the earth turns, water tends to move the other way and tides get higher. That's why the Bay of Fundy looks like that. Mm-hmm. So all of those things factor in, and you can look and see what they think is likely. And then mitigations, as far as I know, across the country have been either limited to moving things inland or putting up seawalls in specific areas to protect certain buildings. But it's going to come, and you're not going to stop it.
No, it's either adapt, retreat, or those are the there's three options essentially.
Yeah.
And it's okay. How far does it go?
Yeah, the area I'm watching in the country is Newport News in Virginia. 25% of the Navy is stationed there, and it floods all the time.
And also that area is sinking because there's an enormous meteorite from tens of thousands of years ago that's underneath that part of the Chesapeake Bay. So that whole terrain is sinking because of that enormous meteorite that sunk into that part of the Hampton Roads, essentially.
So we missed that problem anyway.
Yes, exactly. Thank goodness.
One other question, or are we done?
Yeah, we've got a few more. I think we have 2 more questions if you have time. We are 3 minutes past. Another question from Barbara is about the emissions from sources outside of the state, such as importing food, etc. Was that counted in the plan?
In Europe, you may know that they've started to count imported deforestation emissions in all the food, the soy, the palm oil, the cattle products. And I was just wondering if those emissions were counted in our total, and are we trying to reduce them here in Maine?
I don't think we're that advanced yet. the Europeans have some interesting concepts that are trying to be really inclusive, and and they're good, but we're basically working off of the state's information of what's the carbon input and output from the areas that you saw. I hope we get to the point where that becomes a real question.
Thank you.
So before we log off here, I would like to thank Hannah for sponsoring us here, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk and to meet with you people. So you have a real treasure there in Blue Hill in your library.
That's wonderful
Thank
to hear. We actually have one last question from
okay.
Stephen. What is the current state of thought regarding carbon markets that will impact all pricing and therefore incentivize purchasing lower carbon related products?
I mean, in terms of taxing oil-based products?
I'm not quite sure. Stephen, if you're available to unmute and perhaps clarify, that would be great.
Just the idea of creating a market, okay, for purchasing carbon credits, okay, that would include the price of, you know, carbon. And
I think I can say that carbon credits
that isn't even stated.
Carbon credits have come up in the planning process. We would like to actually get the state to the point where we can actually sell carbon credits to other states, because I suspect we're going to be ahead of the curve compared to many states that are out there. But we have to see over the next several years how fast can we actually achieve our goals.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dodge and Jake and Emily, for helping to facilitate all of this. As a quick announcement before we go, I want to let folks know we have another event coming up on Saturday the 20th. It's an intergenerational climate change discussion. So it's going to be a little less information heavy, but I think a little more discussion oriented. The intention being to kind of get folks of different age groups together talking about you know, what climate change means to them and how we can work together to mitigate it. So there's still a few spots left for that. If you're interested in joining that conversation, you can sign up on our calendar or by calling the library. But for tonight, we'll wrap it up, and thank you all for your great questions. If everyone wants to go ahead, unmute yourselves and give a round of applause for Bob and Jake. Thanks, everyone.
And remember our new state motto. Our new state motto is "Beat Bhutan."
That's wonderful.
Thanks.
Yay.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Bye bye.